Hi, my spooky friends, and welcome back to the Crocheted Caution Tape, where we talk about true crime, mysteries, dark history, and all things spooky. I'm Erica, and come join me as we take a look at one of the craziest true crime stories. Today, we are going to discuss Kitty Genovese, and just so you little warning here. We are going to be discussing SA, brutality, murder, and so this is a little trigger warning. If you that is not your cup of tea, then please feel free to skip. I am trying something different today, as hopefully you can see. I am trying to have what I'm working on more on camera, and I hope that this will continue and it will work. And any more tips or ideas, please feel free to drop those in. So yeah, let's get started. So Catherine Kitty Susan Genovese was born on July 7th, 1935 in Brooklyn, New York. She's the oldest of five children. Uh, Kitty graduated high school in 1953. And soon after her graduation, her mother unfortunately witnessed a murder. Um, it's a different story, but she witnessed a murder and she did not feel safe in living in New York. So the family moved to New Haven, Connecticut. Kitty opted to stay in New York because she was engaged to Anthony Fazzolore. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but she was engaged to get married and she didn't want to move away. So she stayed with her grandparents in Queens. She worked as a secretary at an insurance company during the day and eventually went to work at Eve's Eve's 11th hour bar, where she was a bartender. And uh, Anthony and Kitty were married on October 31st, 1954. Gotta love a good Halloween wedding. However, that marriage was not meant to be, and it was quickly annulled, and they were divorced in 1956. Kitty moved to Queens, where she continued to work at Eve's 11th hour. She quickly moved up, and because of her being so reliable and her extremely positive attitude, she quickly moved up to be the manager at Eve's 11th hour. She got a hefty salary of $750 a month, which would be about $6,800 a month today. Pretty good salary. Um, she was saving money to open up her dream Italian restaurant. Oops. She wanted to open up an Italian restaurant. It was her dream. So she was saving up money to be able to do that. Now, uh, 10 years later, she went to a Greenwich Village swing rendezvous bar in Greenwich Village. There we go. It was an underground lesbian bar, and that is where she met her girlfriend, Mary Ann Zelenko, on March 13th, 1963. Now, Mary Ann and Kitty, they lived a pretty private life. They lived a pretty private life, and they presented themselves as roommates. It was the 1960s, and you know it was legal to discriminate against uh, LGBTQ community, and so they moved into a second floor apartment in Kew Gardens in Queens, New York. It was supposed to be a peaceful area. They had their friends. They just stuck to themselves. Like I said, they didn't want to bring attention to them because it was illegal and very legal to discriminate against them. So, a year after Kitty and Mary Ann met, who the day? March 13th, 1964. Kitty got off work from the bar and was going home around 2:30 in the morning. She parked in the parking area that was near the apartment building that she lived in. And I did that. Okay. Um, she was walking to the front door of her apartment building. She didn't think anything different. She was just going home from work. He was not aware that there was a man that was parked on the street was hunting for somebody to kill. So she gets close to her door, and um, the man appears out of nowhere to her and stabs her. Just out of nowhere, he grabs her and he stabbed her while she screamed. Now, the buildings were very close to each other. There were multiple buildings, there were multiple apartments that were right across the street from her apartment building. And so she was screaming for help. One of her neighbors, Robert Mosier, he opened up the window and screamed, let her, let that girl alone. And at this, the attacker ran off, took off, just left Kitty there. And Kitty uh, made her way around the side of the building to get to the other door to her apartment. She was seriously injured by this, so she had a lot of blood trailing behind her. Uh, so she made it to the building, to the side of the building where, unfortunately, there was no one there to hear her, to witness her, anything. And she made it into the building, and 10 minutes later, as she just gotten into the building, her attacker reappeared. He stabbed her again, and he raped her, and then he stole her money and stabbed her some more. This whole time, she was screaming for help. She was at the bottom of the stairs where one of her neighbors lived right up those stairs, and nobody came to help her. Uh, After the attacker had left, one of Kitty's neighbors and friends, I've seen it both ways. It's either Sophia Farrar or Sophie Farrar, found her at the foot of the stairs and yelled for another neighbor to call the ambulance, call for help, give her some help, and she stayed with Kitty until the ambulance arrived. Unfortunately, Kitty did not make it to the hospital. She passed away in the ambulance on the way. The New York Times had posted an article saying that there were 37 witnesses to this crime. 37 people in the surrounding buildings either saw or heard Kitty getting attacked, and not a single one of them called for help or attempted to help her. That number has been disputed to be very much exaggerated, but there were some witnesses that still they didn't call. They didn't call the ambulance for help. They didn't call the police. They didn't do anything. They just was like, oh, hey, somebody else is gonna call the police. Like, this has got multiple, fairly more people heard this, so I'm not gonna call. This has become known as the bystander effect, where where there are multiple people in an area where somebody needs help, there's a crime being done, something, and everybody thinks, oh, well, somebody else is going to call the police. Oh, sorry, I got out of the screen. There we go. Somebody else is going to call, so I'm not going to call. If you hear somebody screaming for help, regardless of if there are multiple people there that see it or whatever, call the police. Bother the police. Get the people help. Don't worry about bothering the police. Help the people that are screaming for help. Okay. So the investigation. At 4 a.m., the police showed up at Mary Ann and Kitty's door. And this is when Mary Ann found out about Kitty. She didn't know that anything had happened until 4 a.m. Keep in mind that this happened around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. An hour later is when Mary Ann was informed. Uh, Detective Mitchell Sang arrived to question Mary Ann. Uh, Whenever he arrived, Mary Ann was being consoled by neighbor Carl Ross. Now, Carl is the neighbor that lived at the top of the stairs where Kitty was in the building on the floor. His apartment was the one that was at the top of those stairs. But she was being consoled by with liquor by Carl, and he was being he wasn't helping the investigation. He kept intruding into the questions and saying he ended up arresting him for disorderly conduct. Uh, Saying knew that Kitty was found, got caught. Saying knew that Kitty was found laying on the floor at the bottom of the stairs leading to Carl's apartment. This is so crazy. Soon, homicide detectives John Carroll and Jerry Burns arrived at the scene. And they went to Mary Ann and Kitty's apartment to question Mary Ann further. But they weren't questions about the murder. No, they decided to grill Mary Ann about her and Kitty's relationship. They were asking a lot of inappropriate questions, and they were focusing on their relationship instead of focusing on the crime that had happened. Their inappropriate questions were about their sex life, the way they lived. They grilled her about their relationship for 6 hours. 6 hours. and they didn't focus on the crime at all. Uh, soon, backtrack a little bit. The reason why that they were questioning her about that is because whenever they were questioning their neighbors, that is whenever they found out about the lifestyle that Kitty and Marianne lived. So instead of focusing on the crime, they decided to focus on their relationship. Makes perfect sense. Whole perfect sense. So due to their relationship, Mary Ann was considered a suspect. Like I said, in the 1960s, same-sex relationships were illegal, and discrimination based on one's sexual orientation or gender identity was legal. It's perfectly legal. Okay. Okay. So later in the week, the police were called to a scene of a burglary where they had the suspect in basically in custody. Yeah. They found a stolen TV in the suspect's car. This man's name was Winston Mosley, and Mosley was arrested and taken to the station. And when Mosley, he confessed to stealing the appliances of dozens of houses. Um, he drove a white car. Yeah, I don't know what that. He drove a white car, and the description of the white car is the same description of the car that was seen driving away from the scene of Kitty's murder. Excuse me. Uh, Detective John Tartaglia remembered that some of the witnesses at Kitty's murder had said that they had seen the same description of the white car being driven away from the scene. So Tartaglia decided to question Mosley about this. Uh, when mentioned to Mosley, he remained silent. He didn't confess anything. And then they called Tartaglia, then called Detective Singh and Burns, who were investigating Kitty's murder. And they noticed that on the back of his hands, he had scabs and scratches. Whenever they asked him about it, they accused him of murdering Kitty. And that's whenever Mosley confessed. He confessed to killing Kitty and gave information about the murder, about the scene that only the murderer would. I got a big old tangle. I'll tingle. Oh, and I am currently working on a sleeve for my lap to keep it from getting dusty and stuff. Forgot to mention that. Hey. Um, so Mosley saw Kitty. He admitted like he was out there, he was parked on the side of the road, and he was actively looking for somebody to kill. He was looking for a victim. So he saw her walking to the apartment, he followed her home. Well, Mosley, he was married and he had 3 children at home. He had no prior record, no motive for the attack. He was just an evil man who wanted to commit crimes. As far as I could tell, like his family did not know about this, didn't know about his burglaries, his attacks. He would later confess that Kitty wasn't his first victim, that he confessed to several other rapes and the murders of two other women, Annie Mae Johnson and Barbara Crawley. No, Mosley was sentenced. He confessed. So he was sentenced to death on June 15th, 1964. That's the sentence was reduced to a life sentence in 1967. Mosley's son says that he believes that he had attacked Kitty because she yelled racial slurs at him, but from all of the everyone that knew Kitty was like, that's not Kitty. She's so upbeat. She's so nice to everyone. It's not Kitty. Um, so yeah. Now, Mosley did die in jail on March 28th, 2016. Oh, it wasn't that long ago. Well, he was 81 years old. While he was in prison, he did escape from Attica prison in 1968, which added, this was the year after his death sentence had been reduced to a life sentence, but since he escaped, that added an additional 30 years to his sentence. He was denied parole multiple times, 18 times, I believe. And sorry. Now, I had mentioned at the beginning that the bystander effect. The bystander effect had not been heard of or even named until Kitty's case. There were several psychologists who studied the instance and had different trials and like study trials that showed that the more public a crime is, the more out in the open it is, the less likely anyone is to actually police. Like I said, it was all over the New York Times that there were 37 witnesses, and none of them called police. Again, that number is very much exaggerated. The true number is not known, but it was far less than 37. There were still witnesses who did not call the police. Again, if you see a crime, you hear somebody screaming for help, help them. If you can't go and help them, call the police that can help. Get them the help that they need. Don't assume that other people are doing it. Just because it's out in the open and there may be multiple witnesses, do not assume that somebody else is helping. Call the police. Bother the police until they show up. Uh, Now, I believe. Um, so there are two neighbors who have been proven to have witnessed it, and didn't call the police. The main one was Carl Ross. His apartment was right up the stairs where Kitty was murdered at, but he was under the influence and didn't know what to do. So he had called a friend and asked for advice, and the friend was like, "Oh, just stay out of it." So he ended up crawling out of his window and going to another neighbor's house where he did eventually call the police. When police asked him why he didn't call sooner, that's when he was like, I just didn't want to get involved. You can call and be like, hey, I'm an anonymous caller. There's a crime happening at the foot of my stairs. Somebody come, please help. There's somebody getting killed in my neighborhood. Being attacked. Something. No. Nothing. Now, not only was the case about Kitty Genovese, how the bystander effect came to be known, this is also when New York joined a national, um, goodness, a national call for attention, I guess, to get a more direct call line for emergencies. This is how we came up with the 911 emergencies phone number. It's crazy. Crazy. So poor sweet Kitty. I keep going out of focus. I'm not sure why. Sorry. Um, so poor Kitty, who was a lovely lady who was just trying to live her life and save up for her dream. And she was brutally attacked and killed by an evil person who was looking out, actively hunting for a victim. And nobody came to her help. And that, My Spookies, is the story of Kitty Genovese and the bystander effect. If you have any suggestions on future stories, please feel free to drop those in the comments. I do look at those and I do respond to those. If you have any suggestions on anything that could help improve the quality, I now have a mic and I have lighting, so I'm slowly working on it. But if any more suggestions are very much welcome. Please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit that little bell for notifications when I do post new stories. As I have said a couple months ago before the holidays, I do plan on getting on a more regular schedule on posting now that my busy season has now somewhat ended. And I got my indoor setup going, so weather's not going to be a factor. I am really going to be trying to post more regularly. So until next time, my spookies, I love you. Have a great day. Be kind to each other. And I will see you later. Bye.